Thank you for taking the time to come and be part of TEDxSnoIsleLibraries 2020. All around our region and state, across the country, and around the globe, people just like you and me are hungry for ideas and information. We all want to know more. We want to imagine, and we want to understand. And TEDx events are organized to provide opportunities to connect us with ideas worth spreading. TEDx has lent Sno-Isle Libraries its name and approach, allowing us to independently organize this local TED-like event. Because at its core, your public library is all about providing you with ideas and information. And together with TEDx, we have worked to share some of these ideas with you. Now, the really hard work to make this happen has come from each featured speaker and all those who have worked with them behind the scenes. So we invite you to sit back and imagine you are sitting in the largest theater ever. You are appropriately social distance in this virtual space where other members of the audience are all choosing to be present. We are all expectant. We're ready to think deeply. And we are reimagining the quantum connections between ideas and realities. And now, on with the show.
Hello, and welcome to Sno-Isle Libraries 2020. I'm your host, Phil Klein, and today we're going to be spending some time together getting to know one of our speakers and debuting his TEDx talk. Our speakers are reshaping the world, sharing their ideas and knowledge with us, and we invite you to come and think together with us as we explore what they have to say and share. With me are also a team of moderators and a co-host to provide any support we need. And if you're a new or returning attendee of TEDx in your homes or wherever you may be, thank you for taking the time to join us. We will invite you to please enter any questions that you have in the chat, whether you're with us in the Zoom webinar or if you are in the Facebook Live video room. So without further ado, it's time for TEDx. So I'm here to welcome Marty Folsom, who is our speaker today and will be joining us. So Marty, so good to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Great to be with you, Phil. Thanks for inviting me to be here.
Thank you so much. So we are having a little bit of technical difficulties today. So it's in a way par for its course when you have a live event experience like this. And we'll just be sorting through those with our technical team as needed. So thanks for your patience. Marty is an author, a teacher, and a counselor, and has worked with countless couples and individuals, helping them to develop and cultivate deep relationships. And as we kind of begin to think about this together, I'd love to hear from you, Marty. What led you to the point where you felt like it was time to give this talk and that you were the right person to give it?
Right. Well, this is really a lifetime work for me. The nature of relationships, as it always does began with my family. I had a dad who was brilliant and yet not too good on relationships, and a mother who's incredibly loving. And both of them in their own way contributed to me. But as I went through life, there was something missing about the nature of relationships. And so when I got out of high school, I began recognizing that relationships was something that I ended up saying it's all about relationships because that became so important. And I spent the next 20 years in higher education just trying to figure out how do healthy relationships really work? And it's amazing how difficult it is to find answers to that question. So within the last couple of years here, I've done some writing and I've had people who become familiar with my work. And one of them called me up and said, "Have you seen Quantum Connections? That sounds a lot like your work." And so I began to pursue answering the question for the world. What does it really look like to have the deep personal relationships that I've really spent much of my life trying to figure out?
That is so great. Well, we have really enjoyed your preparing and thinking about these ideas and thinking kind of socially and out loud together with us to to answer this really challenging set of questions around what does it mean to get close and to stay close. So for our audience, I encourage you to think today about people in your life who you love, who you'd like to be closer with, and what that means to you. And we'll be turning now to Marty's talk in just a moment. This is a talk that delves so deeply and patiently into so many questions. I invite you to relax, unfasten your seatbelts, and receive this fascinating talk by Marty. And we'll join and do audience questions and answers after the video completes. So thank you, and let's debut and premiere your talk.
Awesome. From the time that we are born, we need personal connection. Without it, babies die, and our lives disintegrate into anxiety and apathy, into loneliness and depression. In our disconnection, we isolate, we medicate with our favorite addictions, and we vacate, trying to escape the emptiness of our lives. There's something here that deteriorates to the point that I call it the pandemic of the personal. Now, this is a global tragedy of separateness that's unraveling the very web of our personal lives. So what do we do in the face of it? We hide. We put on masks, pretending that we're happy, when in fact we are falling apart inside. This is something that some cultures deal with by calling it saving face. The mask hides it all, but if we're saving face, the question I want to ask is, what is getting lost? Now, I am far from perfect, and I have been struggling with this question for years myself to figure out what does it mean to really have a deep, personal, connected life. And I think that this is the most fulfilling thing that we could have. And for most of us, it's the thing that we are most missing. And I'd like to tell you that there is hope. Change is possible. And I'd like to show you what that looks like. So my research journey led me to a metaphor of mirrors that really helped me. Now, if I have one mirror and I look at it, I am isolated. I see myself, just me and the mirror. I'm alone with myself. But if I look long enough, I begin to become aware of other people that I'm worried will be thinking about me, that they're going to look to see if I look good, that I need to manage their impression of me. And so I start to become less connected with myself and only wanting to create an impression for them that's not authentically me. That's a problem. Now, often we have our mirrors alongside of someone where we are holding things in common. We love the same movies. We love the same music. We love the activities that we share together. But even there, often other things, other people, other activities take us so that those mirrors turn away and become disconnected. Now, there is another possibility that I would like you to engage, and that is when two mirrors face one another. When these mirrors face one another, and you may have seen this in a bathroom, the echoes that they have create a corridor kind of effect. It looks as though they disappear into the wall, a 3D kind of effect because they're well aligned with one another. Now, if we take this into a social analogy, when I know that you know what I know, and I know that you know what I know, and I know that you know that I know that you know, the more times that I can do that, the more times we can do that, the greater the sense of depth in our relationship, the greater the connection that might be there. This is called recursion, the reoccurring of the images or the thoughts, the knowing and being known that create what we would call deep connection. Now, I'd like to take you just through the first three levels of what this looks like to give you a deeper understanding of what's going on. So when I show up and I am able to be present with an open hand, then I'm available. If I show up not wanting people to know me, afraid of what people might think, I will be closed. But in my ability
to know what I think or feel, and to be able to say that to others, I become authentically present and able to have a relationship with another person. Now, there was a day that I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I have a story in my head that you don't love me. And he fortunately showed up as well. And he went on for about 3 hours talking about all the ways that he had tried to show or demonstrate his love that I never would have gotten if he hadn't told me. But the fact that I showed up authentically meant that he had the capacity to step into the place and meet me so that we could move into a new dimension in our relationship. It didn't take us into amazing places that day, but it began a journey of connection. And that is the important thing, to be in that journey of connection. Now, the next level is called empathy. With empathy, another person may show up closed. And if they show up closed, then recursion is not possible. There's no reflection that can happen. So they also have to show up willing to be authentic. But once they do show up authentic, then I can attune to them. And I know that I've achieved something when I've listened to them and I respond back in such a way that they get to a point where they say, wow, it's like you got inside my head. It's like you really get me. Then I know empathy is happening. In the movie Avatar, there's a point where they use the phrase, I see you. And it's not just a looking at the person, it's a looking into the person that is indicated there. And that is, I think, a great picture of the kind of empathy that I'm talking about. So when I show up and am with a person who is available for me, then empathy happens and recursion can happen. Now, there was one day when I was counseling a 13-year-old, and I asked him the question, when you have a bad day, which was the issue he was dealing with, who does that affect? And he said, I think it affects me. And I said, you are absolutely right, it does. But there might be more. His dad was in the room also. I said, do you mind if we ask your dad? And so Dad said, well, when you have a bad day, it affects me, it affects your mom, it affects your sister, it affects the dogs. And in a moment of brilliance, this kid opened up and said, I get it. It's like a famdemic. I am affecting the whole family by my way of being. Brilliant. The breakthrough was there. The possibility of the empathy mere happening was opened up in that place, and we were able to continue on and move in a positive direction. Now, the next place beyond empathy is connection. And with connection, there is a sense that you not only know and are known, but there's a respect that you have. There's a sense of trusting the other person because you know that you're known, because you're acting in a way that's consistent with it. So that if you know that someone is gluten intolerant and you give them food with gluten in it, well, they're going to say, why should I trust you? You're not taking care of me. And so to not act in a way that is consistent with the knowing loses that sense of respect and the agreement that we'll take care of one another that is part of real connection. Now, there's a song that was sung long ago. You may have heard it before. It's called When I Fall in Love. And there's a particular point in the song that gets us what we need. It's that moment where the singer says, and the moment that I feel that you feel that way too is the moment I fall in love with you. Can you feel it? That's the moment where recursion is born, where the knowing and being known births into love for one another. It's not going to stay that way unless they keep coming to one another, but we've captured there the moment that recursion is born. The knowing and the being known is an affirming, trusting, loving way of being that they have with one another. Now, often when I have a first appointment with a couple in counseling, I'll sit with them and I'll ask one of them, why do you think your spouse thinks that you are here? And the person may say, I have no idea. And we have a lot of work to do just to get something out of them that tunes them together. And so opening them up may be tricky. They may say, well, they have a problem, so they just blame the other person for the problem. Or they'll say there's a problem out here that we need to work on. It's not us, it's this other thing, the kids or our finances or something like that. And so this person may say, you think that's the issue? You don't get it. And so we have a lot of work to do to get that point where there's a knowing and a being known and a trust that is built out of that. And then they have to be able to keep feeding the fire for the relationship to stay aligned with one another. And when they do, they say things like, I hear your heart, and we're on the same page. You get me. Now, the mirrors that begin aligned often in our relationships, we are so excited to get to know somebody. We ask all kinds of questions and we quickly learn all kinds of things about them. But there comes a point where we think we've pretty much got them down and we become confident that we've got them. And so we don't pay as close of attention and we start to drift away. But we're confident to the point we might say, I know you better than you know yourself. But in fact, we are turning, and so it can come to be that our accuracy gets way off. And so we have a high level of confidence with a low level of accuracy. And so the relationship is going to have some serious problems. And so we end up just looking at life in the rearview mirror. It's an image of who they were back when we got to know them well. Or they end up just portraits on the wall, that snapshot of when we were really in love at the beginning, and we just assume that they're the same person. Now, those are relationships that have moved to a place of reclusion. They can get to the point where they're back to back, touching one another, but in no way connected to one another's world. And so we have to move them to the place where recursion is possible, where once again, away from the neglect, we come to connect with what it means to really know and be known in a significant kind of way. Now, this is something that you can have just with newlyweds, or you can have it 23 years into the marriage. Often when the kids have moved out, they'll come into my office because they have nothing left to connect them other than the kids who were there. And now we have to see, can we get back to a connected way of being? Now, some people say to me, this sounds like a lot of work. Who all do I need to do this with? And I'll say, my wife's a dentist, and people will talk to her about brushing their teeth. And they'll say, do I have to floss too? And she'll say, you only need to floss the teeth you want to keep. And that's the point here too. You only need to do this with relationships that you care about. So the question for you is, who do you care about enough that you want to invest the time and the energy to really connect with them? Now, this is something that isn't just for families, though families are a great place to practice it. It can be something you take to your work. It can be something you work on in your church or when you go to a restaurant. There are all kinds of people who you may want to take a few minutes just to begin the process of knowing and being known and to make a connection with them. My favorite philosopher, John McMurray, has the image of two tables. If you could imagine a table in front of you, and on that table is wonderful food, there's beautiful music playing in the background, everything is set to perfection. The people are all wearing suits and the women all have on beautiful dresses, and everybody is on their best behavior. Etiquette rules the table and everybody's afraid of what everybody else thinks of them. The energy is basically everybody's afraid of what is going to happen if they make a mistake, don't say something right. And so this is a table of fear. But what if we have a different setting of this table? Same table, same food, same music, but now we have friends who are coming together for a reunion. They show up energized. They can't wait to share with their friends what's been happening in their life. They can't wait to hear the stories about what's been going on. And there's an energy in the room. There's an enthusiasm that's engaged that says these are people who are really constituting a table of friendship. This is entirely different, and the attitudes of authenticity and empathy create the kind of connection that we experience at this table. Now, I have a dream that what we're talking about here would make a difference for you and really everyone else in the world. And I'd like you to imagine a world where people really took the time to see eye to eye and to really look not at people, but really look into them, to indwell them in such a way that they hear their heart. That there would be a sense of opening up to the other, an authenticity that would show up in that space where it's not just you and I sitting here, but it's us growing together. Now, when I was in the 9th grade, I had my first kiss, but I closed my eyes and so I missed her mouth. And I discovered that having open eyes allows you to focus on where that connection can happen. And that's what we're talking about here as well. the ability to look at another person, to accept them as they are, to inquiringly look into their eyes, to want to know who they are, to lovingly sense what it means to be present for them, to patiently listen, and to vulnerably show up yourself and let yourself be known. Now there is the possibility for the relationship to go somewhere, but there also may need to be speaking and hearing to clarify what it is that has been made available in this open space, to deal with the issues in life that need healing, to make promises and agreements to one another about what is possible in the future. So the speaking and the hearing builds a possibility that together you're going to have the conversations that make you truly connected. Now, most people brush their teeth in the morning and they brush their teeth at night. What if we added another 2-minute kind of exercise of just saying, tell me today about what you're looking forward to and the things that you're a little bit afraid of. And at the end of the day, how did it go with that thing you were afraid of? And how did that go with the thing you were looking forward to? I think that this speaking and hearing would allow for a understanding that would keep the relationship together on a day-by-day basis. And there would be a sense that they would come to a place of mutual serving, not just one taking care of the other, but that each of them would connect with the other and they would act in a way that was consistent with what they had heard and said to one another in ways of really taking care of one another, so that there was a collaboration, a working together, and the relationship itself would become resilient. There would be a sense of caring that would be going on. There would be a sense of trusting that they know the other person in a trustworthy kind of way. And that there would really be a sense of partnership in the relationship. Now, this means that they're going to have something that is locked together in a way that says we belong together and we act in a way that is consistent with who the other person is. This leads to the place where we get something that I call connection with gratitude. It's exactly the opposite. That is, gratitude is exactly the opposite of complaining. Complaining notices what's missing. Gratitude notices what's there and is thankful for it, cherishes the other person, is thankful that that person is there, and they're beloved. They are endeared to one another because there's a sense that this other is one whose presence is making a difference in creating deep connection. This creates for a playful relationship. These people can enjoy each other and play. And this gives us the kiss of life that I think we all deserve and want. And in the end, this creates what I call communities of connection. And they get built one relationship at a time. That's the opportunity for you. This is not an impossible dream. This is life redeemed. Now, I love personal relationships and getting deep in those relationships and the connections that can come when I help people, when I teach classes. And I invite you into this dance of the future as well, a dance of freedom. And I'd like you to even imagine that we show up with one another and we say, let's align. That the very course of our life is shaped by desiring to align with one another and to discover deep connection that is possible when we meet face to face. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it was great to see that, Marty. Congratulations on really landing a tremendously challenging topic and so many ideas in that. And for doing so much work to get that nestled in. You really span from the most intimate personal relationships at birth out to much longer term relationships and then out to community relationships. Can you help us to think about how does someone who wants to start doing recursive relationship building, what are a few ways that they can kind of get started and kick that off if they've not done anything like that before? You might be muted.
How's that?
That sounds much better. I hear you Hearing me, hearing you.
How's that?
Good, we hear you.
Okay. The exciting thing is if you begin assuming you know nothing, you're in the best place. So I encourage people to say, I know who you were a year ago, but I really want to have something new and fresh with you today. So let me just start by saying, you said today that you wanted to do something fun. And I don't want to assume that whatever was fun in the past would fill that out. So tell me today what it is. So this sense of not allowing the past to control our present or our future, but to show up as somebody who's really curious, inquisitive about what this particular person would want around any particular issue. I wish we could do something productive today. Well, I know what productive would look like for me, but tell me what it would be for you. And then when the person says, I want to spend time walking together. Really? That's productive? I would have called that exercise. Well, it would feel like I'm making a move towards getting my body in shape. Awesome. If that's productive, let's do that. But now there's this opening of the space and listening so that recursion can happen without assuming that there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to know. It really does show up willing and able to ask and then to hear and then to say, I can do this. Or it's, I want to do exercise, but could we go for a bike ride instead of a walk? It's like, yeah, I think I could do that. Now I'm showing up too saying a bike ride would be great. So I'm not giving myself away. I'm saying, I hear your heart. I see what you want. And I want to do that with you, but could we modify it in this kind of a modification of that? Now each person is attending to each other. So it really just requires that you not be burdened by all of the thoughts of the past about what this person must want or must mean by this, but just to say, you know what? I know what you may have meant in the past. Freshly present yourself today with this, and I'm ready to hear it. Now we're on our road.
So remembering that each day we're actually a little bit different than we were the day before, each year, that's also true.
Sometimes time of day. People in the morning are not the same. That's why we have morning people and evening people. So I know who you were this morning. How are you doing tonight? And what does that look like?
So kind of continuing to get to know someone. And you mentioned that people really have, different definitions of what counts as productive. When there are those differences, how do you find balance if one person, let's say, wants to talk a lot and the other person wants to talk less? How do they start to find common ground while honoring differences?
Right. So, I think just to say to the person, in the end, I really want to be on the same team as you. Can we have a conversation about what that looks like? And my favorite word of this is the word clean. The house is clean. Look at it. It's, there's nothing sitting on the tables. But the other person says, yeah, but look at the dust. Look at the floors that haven't been vacuumed for a week. So the fact that you use the word clean and to just say one person may have a high definition and may want to download, as you say, a lot about what clean looks like. And for the other person to say, I get that you have all that desire for that. For me, clean looks like this. And so I'm willing to enter into your form of cleanness, but it's going to require something of me. Would you be willing to also take time after that to relax or play together? And if the other person can say, yeah, I'd be willing to do it. The person who is not the speaker, it feels like, okay, you are a high maintenance person, which is good because you know what you want and you're telling me. But this other person says, I am valid here also. And the fact that I'm willing to do what is not natural to me for you means that I'm also asking you to honor and respect me so that we can play together, because that's really what touches my heart. And when that kind of meeting can happen, a simple listening and responding and creating something together that works for both of them, I call that an agreement. Every agreement looks different, but it's heard both people and come up with something that both of them can say, yep, I can do that. And I always say, it's not an agreement till both people can say, yeah, I can do that.
Wow. So getting closer through developing listening and a practice that leads to agreements that both sides. So, you may have situations where one person wants to speak a lot more than the other, and that person may be asked to listen more. And, I want to go into a little bit of this complexity and the challenge of what it's like when relationships get difficult, or as you described, They can be a bit of a famdemic. A famdemic can break out in a family and in any relationship. What is the, you described in that example of the young adolescent sharing about that and how he started to see the impact of his relationship.
That's right.
What's a way that people can start to see their impact on others, in their relationship and how they're coming across?
Right. Well, the metaphor of seeing is I'm observing the world and interpreting it from a distance. Listening really gets into the person's world. And so to say, we live in a world where so much of what we do is looking at TVs, reading books. We are looking so much. And this really does require the skills of listening. And the most powerful form of that is asking a question. If I think I know you, I basically build a wall. You are behind that wall and I've got you figured out. But if I have a question, it's an ability to open the gate in the wall and say, help me to see what's going on here. And so to have good questions is the beginning place for this journey. And if I'm sitting in a restaurant with somebody, to just begin by asking, so what's your name, to the person who's serving me? And so they tell me their name and, to say, so how is it going for you tonight? I mean, it's a simple little question, but if it's going well, I can say, thanks for serving us. It's just so great, the attitude you have here. I love that. Or if they're having a hard day, to say, so what's going on there? I'm just asking questions that are opening that in a public setting with somebody who I'm not counseling them at all. I'm just treating them as a person. I'm just saying you are worthy of my time for me to honor you in such a way that when I walk away, you're going to go, I feel like somebody cared about me for a moment. And they may not literally think this, but something just happened to them that was a touch of the personal and feeling honored in a service kind of role that I think is a gift that we can give to people. So it can be a very passing thing, or it can be in a family where you just don't ask questions because you think you know what they're going to say. And so to even begin saying, I'm really afraid to ask this question, but I care so much about you, I have to ask it anyway. How are you doing? You just lost this person, or I just haven't heard from you for so long. I just want to get in touch with where you're at. And so have at it.
Wow. I mean, easier said than done, it feels, like it's easy to start the way you sort of give these accessible questions to us, like, hey, how are you? And wanting to connect and reach out. And then as you deepen, it becomes perhaps more challenging, particularly if hurt feelings come up, or difficult emotions, or there's a disagreement or a break in agreement. What is it like to sort of, as that habit develops, to start kind of getting to the next level of deepness in emotional communication that transcends those those disruptions and that allows that pain, but addresses it in a healthy way?
Right. So disruptions are largely the mirrors missing one another, right? So it may be that you just say, what, I feel like we're not on the same page right now. Would it be okay with you if we got together tomorrow and just process through? I think I need to think about what it is that you are really committed here, that I'm sure is a positive thing. And I really want to get clear on what I'm hearing your intent is. And I think I'm showing up with some frustration and anger about how this happened. And I think I really need to go back and go, what is it that I'm really looking for here? And if I can just ask permission, can we come back to this later and hear the good intent of both people? That space gives us time to do that. So the asking of permission, and often I say to people to just ask, it seems like there's a lot of tension here. Can we just have a conversation to try and unpack this? And if the person says yes, then you unpack it. If they say no, say, thank you for being honest with me, because if you're not ready, then now is not the time to try and do this. Would you be willing to do this in an hour or tomorrow or at some point? When would work for you? Acknowledging the reality is one of the best things to do, and then to invite the person into a future moment when the possibility of re-engaging it can happen. Now we've got somewhere to go. Because conflict is what happens between good people in life. I mean, we often think that conflict is, somebody's right and somebody's wrong, somebody's bad. But I always say conflict is two good people who have different expectations. They're expecting different things out of what that evening should have looked like, or how that discipline should have gone. but both of them are really good people, and they both have their expectation about what would have been the loving way to have the evening go or the discipline go, but they weren't on the same page. The conflict is the not aligned here, and you feel all of that sense of challenge going on. So to really take the time to find what permission looks like, and then to re-engage in a way that really hears the other and the goodness that is there, now you've got something to build on.
Wow, that is so great. That insight of alignment and not alignment being really what conflict is largely about. I want to turn to some of our audience questions in just a moment, but before I do, I wanted to ask you about this idea of creating community than just an individual or a family relationship. How is that different? How does people start to build that mirror deepening of relationship in a community?
Right. Well, this is obviously something, it's a big challenge in our world right now, right? So the whole thing of finding voice is part of it, because voice is the way that the first part of the authenticity of a community, which right now we could say Black Lives Matter, are people who are saying, we don't feel like we've been heard. So as a community, we want to show up and say, we have value and we want to know and be known. And when people meet them and say, we see you, we hear you, we want to honor you as well. Now, the tricky thing with this is that we have so many issues going right now, it's difficult. And the writing of American history with Native American issues, with the Black, with all the different subgroups that are there are a lot of voices. And so people right now are a little bit having a hard time hearing because there's so much conflict around it. So it's going to require that there are people who say, my commitment is to be somebody who hears well. I can't change everything, but at least I can listen and reflect back to you that I'm hearing what it is that you have heard in such a way that you know that you are not off the screen, that you are not behind the wall. And I think if we can do that, there's a sense in which just hearing the stories be told matters. I've had students in classes before who are from different ethnic origins who would say, don't just call me Black or Hispanic, say, where are you from? I'm from Argentina. I'm from Nigeria. The fact that you listen to the country that I came from actually sounds like you know me, and either that I was born there and my parents were born there, and you're inquiring into the story of my life. And I feel like you're seeing me as part of a community. I love it in Australia and New Zealand. They often will introduce themselves as speakers by saying, this is my mountain, this is my river, this is my city, these are my people. And there's an identification within a group, a community, that says, I'm here and you're not that. But I want you to know my community so that I show up with a voice and you know that I'm not just a topic or an authority. I'm a person with a community, and I'm meeting you here today as a community. I think we need these places where we meet in communities, and I think that TEDx is one of the places that can happen, and libraries is one of the places that can happen, where we have communities who meet and listen as communities who don't just represent a single person, but really represent, we live in this place, we have concerns, and we want to meet them together. But it requires people who say, voice matters to speak and voice matters to listen. And then the recursive process can begin.
Wow. Yeah. So that alignment starts to take root as we listen and find our voice together. That's very powerful. So turning to a question, there was a question, how has quarantining impacted relationships from your perspective? And as some people are much more often together and others are further apart, have you seen any trends or do you have any special advice during these times?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, what is quarantined is our bodies, right? Our bodies have this capacity to infect someone else. We are not quarantined from having conversations. Phones still work, Facebook chats work, Zooms work. I'm doing more Zoom conversations now than I've ever done because I never had done any before. And so the whole question of, if you want to hear somebody's voice, if you want to hear what's important to someone, are we shut down from that? We are not. The person who I originally heard about the idea of recursion from now lives in Sweden. And I was able to find him through the person who was his doctoral supervisor. And we're having a conversation now. He's an artist, he does beautiful art there, but the fact is he has a voice now with me that didn't happen before. And so while we are being quarantined, if we have the intention of connecting with people, of saying, you know, I've been thinking about you, what's happening for you, we have all of the capability. It's not as natural as maybe sitting next to somebody in a workplace or people who go to church to have those conversations there, but there is nothing in place. And one could argue there is more time and more opportunity to make that call with the people who are important to you and to say, I miss you. Here's what I miss about you. I miss your laugh. I miss hearing what you're wrestling with. The opportunity is actually potentially greater. With students, I teach online. So with students online, nothing has changed because that was the medium we were already in. So nothing's changed there because we had that kind of an engagement. But the possibility with people who aren't my online students, I am having more conversations, more connections. I also do counseling online. I haven't necessarily had an increase at this point, but the nature of the fact that the things that were already online were close. So the skills that I have of asking questions, engaging and helping people are just as much in place. And now I'm bringing them into the relationships that weren't, and I will use the word forced to go that way. And guess what? We're actually doing more. Now, you and I are just old enough to remember the day where there were no cell phones, where there were no Facebook, where there weren't a lot of the ways of connecting. And we were relatively limited. And I had dreams about talking to people in Great Britain and Australia, New Zealand, but it was almost literally impossible unless you had just the right connection. Now I have daily conversations with people in the UK, in Australia, New Zealand, India. I'm conversing almost every day. Are they all deep? No. Are some of them deep? Yes. So I take it as a great time for us to say, these can be training wheels to get us to say, I will not be stopped. I will be the voice that listens, the voice that engages people to have richer relationships. So do I want this quarantine to be over? Absolutely, because I have fun being with friends as well. Does it get in the way of recursion? It does not.
So schedule those times to have those conversations with people. You know, we do have that time, and when you choose the time, like you were saying in your talk, it has advantages because if it's good to kind of be a little bit prepared for it, it gives you that advance warning.
You can tell a person, I only have 2 minutes for you, but let's make the most of that 2 minutes. Managing our time is also important. Some people just don't do it because they think it's going to run away from them. Set a time limit.
So setting a time limit, as well as, you know, you mentioned doing a couple minutes at the beginning of the day and a couple minutes at the end of the day.
Yep.
And do you find that that is enough to create a habit, or that sometimes longer duration conversations and time together makes sense, that it requires an investment to make it habitual?
Yeah. So, I mean, to say that the things that we enjoy, we do more of. So if you have that conversation, you find it enjoyable meeting that person in the morning and the evening, you're probably going to do it longer. If it's a challenging conversation every time, you may say, you know, I think we need some help with this. And you may actually go and get some counseling to help you deal with that. The idea originally came from the movie, The Story of Us, and they had what they called their high-low. And so at a meal, to just take a moment and say, what's your high or your low you're looking forward to at the end of the day, high-low. So to tie it in with the meal and just say, okay, it's part of the pattern of our eating together, is just to create a space to listen. So there, the discipline has something that the habit is tied to, something that most of us are pretty good at, habitually eating. We don't always eat together. So it may require saying, you know, let's eat together so we can do our high-low or our sharing about the day kind of time. So that's just bringing those habits together maybe. And it does require working together at that, which is itself recursive, right?
Yes.
It's creating the agreement.
And there's also offering a rose, a thorn, and a bud to honor the different, you know, gratitude and pain and the growing parts of a relationship.
Yeah, you bring the garden in. Gardens require watering. How often do you water?
Yes.
And how often do
Care
you
and
weed? Feeding. Yeah. So all of those things, if you care for your garden, maybe you could do that for your relationships.
Speaking of which, we have someone who asks, when you have a relationship that has lost its depth over the years, what strategies do you offer?
So I'm hearing lost its depth. It means you're still together, but you don't have a sense of knowing and being known. You're literally roommates or housemates in a sense and not connected. So you really have to ask yourself the question to begin with, is this something that's worth pursuing, that's worth my time? And if it is, to begin to ask the question, what is the possibility here? The question of what is the possibility is not a guarantee that it will happen. To say, I wish we could talk about the news, or I wish I could talk about how I feel about myself. And so to begin to just clarify, is this relationship worthwhile? What are the points of commonality that we may want to begin with to begin to try and become aligned to one another? And then what are the things that are really important to you? And to be able to say, I just feel like you don't see me, and there's things that are really important to me that I'd love to be able to talk about with you. Would you be willing to do that? So I call this making a request. With my wife, I'm all the time saying, so what's your request here? And at the end of a letter, she'll read a letter to try to somebody. So what's your request? So if we want to take a shallow relationship and go somewhere, we have got to figure out what our request is. And either they're going to say, I can do that, or they're going to modify it, or they're going to say, you know what, I don't want to do that. And if they do, and if they're being honest, then we need to say, okay, either I need to work on another strategy, but the coming and appealing, inviting, requesting, that's not going to work. It may be time for individual therapy, maybe your ability to be self-confident, maybe just, who am I to value myself enough that when I show up, I am that unstoppable force that this person just can't turn away from.
Yeah, so I want to slow down just a little bit because there was a lot in what you just shared, and you have definitely already covered a few key checkboxes. A relationship requires people coming together,
Yep.
creating agreements and alignment that allow that alignment to work well for both partners. There's a natural, or there is a tendency that can arise to pull away and to pull apart. But you also described that you do need to ask yourself, and maybe even in relationship, is what's the possibility?
That's right.
And that's a powerful and difficult question, because that means confronting, pulling away, or changing the relationship in some fundamental way. And it's good to get help when you start to feel, one way or another in relation to that.
Yep.
But to not look at the possibility is avoiding recursion and closeness.
That's absolutely right. And I try not to use words like confronting.
Scary.
Confronting is so
It's
confronting,
scary.
right? So I mean, to say, to inviting a different future or considering what could be, you can call those confronting, but you're building in a resistance to it that just doesn't need to be there. And if you really care about somebody, dream about the best possible thing with them and speak that to them. I say to people who are dating, show up as yourself for one, and tell them what you dream about, because this person, you want them to fall in love with who you actually are and what you would love life to look like. If you tell them all that you're concerned about that might not work in the relationship, or that they might or might not be this, resistance is all they're going to feel, because they're going to feel like this person isn't even going to see me, and all they are is full of complaints. Be a dreamer, live out loud, love the life that is possible, and you might actually end up with that.
A couple or people in relationship can actually grow a dream together, perhaps bigger than they can on their own.
Exactly.
There's a question about cases where someone is alexithemic and disconnected with their own feelings, has difficulty using language or understanding or even knowing what it is that they're feeling. How can they start to build relationships that are recursive, and how can that obstacle be addressed in a healthy way?
Yeah, it's a great question too. And it's amazing to me that there isn't more done on this, because there are many people who are not in touch with their feelings. And to begin by just using a sense even of, if a person held up their hands like they're pushing away, just saying, I don't know what to say here, but this doesn't feel good. If you were with somebody who was willing to, when they didn't feel good, they just held up their hands like this, you'd get a sense that there's some kind of resistance. They don't have words for it yet. And if you could say, I'm sensing that there's a resistance for you here. Can you tell me a story about what happened at all? And usually people do have a sense of something happened, I don't know, but last night, before we went to bed, you said something, I can't remember the words, but I felt totally defeated. Well, defeated last night. And then to say, well, these are the words I remember saying. Let's see if any of those triggered something for you. So resistance is one thing. If the person doesn't have words to say, but there's something positive, to reach out hands like I can embrace that. Give me more of that. It feels like you want something, but I don't know what it is. It's like more of that. Okay, you're wanting something. Just the hand motions to be able to know there's something there that I'm willing to explore this. Give me more. A person who has language can help fill into that open space that's created and find words. Now, I think that we should start in kindergarten with just learning those hand signals. The kids in the morning just say, how are you feeling about class today? And they may go this, and they may go, give me more. And if kids learn to use that, and then as you go through the years to find the language, then we wouldn't be in the place when we're adults. We're void of a language. We learn Spanish and French and these other languages. What if we just learned the language of emotions so that we could communicate and to recognize emotions are relationships?
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just start with the resistance and the acceptance or the desire, if I could just get those and then learn language to play that out, then we wouldn't end up with people. It would literally be like those diseases we've eradicated where there wouldn't be people who had this problem. But for now, to just begin, where I'd begin with kindergartners, just using hand signals, and maybe you need to create some.
Mm-hmm.
But that begins to not depend upon the words that people don't have and does give a sense, because we almost immediately do a lot of hand signals and face signals. And so to say, I see that something's going on for you there. And the phrase, can you tell me a story about what happened there? Or tell me a story about what's happening, often will invite people, because people do often remember the story of what happened. And I can hear all of the emotion if they tell me the story. It's a huge open window. It's like the theater opens up.
So I want to close with one additional question about, we have asked here, so you have, what is a world like where people have developed these? There's an idea of, high school students learning the 3 new R's, which would be reflection, relationships, and resilience, to kind of create that insulated experience for development of recursion in young people. And I want you to share your story and dream. You've coached and seen many people start to open up their relationships and to deepen them in powerful ways. Can you share what is a world like where everyone in a group or in a family set, what is that like? What do you see unfolding in that world?
Well, it's a huge challenge and a huge opportunity. I saw a short clip last week, I think it was on 60 Minutes, of the We Care group. And they as a community put literally on their mailbox, We Care. And they gather the neighborhood together on ongoing occasions to just know each other as neighbors. Well, that's a beginning of a step. And the neighbors who are in need, what do? We care, and they care in action. And so to go, wow, there is a group that is actually doing what it is that I'm talking about. And that's at the level of neighborhoods, and there are different neighborhoods that are doing it differently. And I've even seen that in Washington State, in Bellingham, at least I know, there are some We Care groups going on. So there is a sense in which that We Care is a practical recognition of the value of neighbors and neighborhoods to just go and knock on a door and say, hey, I'm your neighbor. I want to get to know you. We're going to do this barbecue. Let's get to know each other. That is the beginning of the recursive process. It would be nice if churches did this some. It would be nice if businesses, my daughter works at Starbucks, and Starbucks does better than many businesses of really caring about the nature of who these people are. And she's having her degree in psychology paid for by Starbucks because they're saying, we care that you go on in life. And so businesses can have an attitude of you're not just somebody to fill that position, but you're a human being who's a person. And we believe in you having a better life. And so we're going to invest in that. Now, there's a level of corporateness there, but it's just another expression that says it's not just a family or just a couple. It really has a capacity at every level of how we think about the nature of relationships, and not only to other human beings, the nature even of creation, the nature of the world. There's a person, a great thinker I like, who says at some level, science is giving voice to the world. It's saying, I need you to take care of me, or I need you to know my story. And so when we listen to the story of what it looks like to take care of environments that take care of us, we are listening, we are becoming attentive, and we're hearing what's going on, and we respond in a way that's even caring there. So you can just see that at every level, this question, what is the voice of the person, the group, the other, the neighborhood, the world that is there, and what is it that we then can do in response that comes from this place of I know and honor and care about you to the point that I'm willing to do something. I can't care about people all around the world, but I can start with my wife, and I can start with my kids. And when my kids want to go into psychology or caring for information systems, I can say, that's an awesome thing to do. That's part of caring for people as well. And how you care for the people you work with, that's part of creating this community. It's not just a job. All of these are about relationships. That's why my phrase, it's all about relationships. Even businesses. I mean, everybody knows that if you have a good business relationship, it's probably going to be a better business. Politics would be better served if it was all about relationships, because it matters to us that we engage and value and honor and find ways where we're not just seeing one side or the other, but that all of it has a place. All of it can connect.
Wow. Well, I just want to thank you, Marty, so much for taking this time. Every conversation I've had with you has helped me to deepen my relationships with others. And I hope our audience also had a great chance to experience some of what Marty had to share in a deep way that will ripple outwards in your lives. Thank you, all of you who have joined. Thanks to our production staff and to TEDxSnoIsleLibraries. Future events will be held. We're starting a session relatively soon with Yaling Liu. And so we hope to see you again soon at a future TEDx. Thank you again so much for joining.
TEDxSnoIsleLibraries 2020 has been made possible through the generous support of corporate and community-based organizations who believe in the power of ideas and information. We'd like to thank these organizations for partnering with us. Coastal Community Bank, serving the financial needs of customers throughout Western Washington. Coastal Community Bank, where community is not just their middle name, it's how they do business. Community Transit of Snohomish County, providing public transportation alternatives and solutions which help people get from where they are to where they want to be. OverDrive, always innovating to help libraries transform by providing digital content such as ebooks, audiobooks, magazines, and video for public libraries. Washington Energy Services, providing heating, cooling, and other service solutions to help Puget Sound residents save energy and live better. And our founding partner, the Sno-Isle Libraries Foundation, committed to mobilizing people and resources to expand the reach of Sno-Isle Library services, promote civic engagement, and foster a lifetime of learning.